Alright, we're back. So this time we're going to be reviewing the Damian Puckett Fusion. The Fusion was sent to me by Damian Puckett along with other yo-yos, but this one stood out for me for various reasons. And we are going to be talking about those various reasons. But just for context, I've owned this yo-yo since January 2023. So yeah, it's been a year and a few days, but better late than never. And so before we get into the review, remember to like the video if you enjoy what you see, and hit that subscribe button to stay notified about any other future uploads. And so with that out of the way, let's jump right into it.
Hi, where are you from?
Alright, so just a heads up. In this rating, 3 means simply average at that category, 4 and 5 means it's better, and 2 and 1 means it lacks or slightly underperforms, so keep that in mind. With that being said, let's start with the physical attributes. First, we have comfort. In terms of comfort, this yo-yo is fairly narrow. I wouldn't say it's the narrowest, and I wouldn't say it's actually that bad, but it has rounded rims. It has fairly rounded rims, actually. And the shape has a few cuts leading into the shape, but the thing is, there's a little bit of compression with it, so you can feel that it's alright, I guess. Now do keep in mind that comfort varies depending on the person wielding the yo-yo, and so if you have thinner or thicker hands than me, this rating might vary for you, but nonetheless it's still worth considering. Now if you want to figure out how comfortable a yo-yo is, all you really need to consider is how your fingers interact with the yo-yo and how it sits on your palm, both when holding it and when the yo-yo comes back to your hand. With that being said, the yo-yo doesn't really sit well with my hand. While it may sit well for people with smaller hands, I have slightly thicker hands than normal. The fingers don't really have anywhere to sit other than the center, but the center isn't really that angled very well to accommodate the fingers, so in terms of comfort, I'm giving this a 3 out of 5. It's not that bad, but it's not the best either. Going into grinds, this is actually quite surprising. The yo-yo has this sort of metallic polished finish, but when I grind on it, it's not bad. It's actually very smooth. If you do this with dry hands, I reckon you can do pretty good grind tricks with this. It is very smooth. It doesn't look like it as much, but when you do when you do try it, it works very well. As for the build quality, it's also not that bad. Also very light. Surprisingly, it is very light. If you take a look at the specs later, you'll see how light this yo-yo really is, but it doesn't really elaborate how light this yo-yo really is. It feels like it's less than 60 grams, but it's not, and it doesn't die as fast. So going into durability, this yo-yo feels very thin, but it can take a few hits very well. I've dinged this yo-yo very often, and honestly I would say it can take a beating pretty well. As for smoothness on the string, this thing is absolutely phenomenal. Honestly, all the yo-yos that Damian sent me, all of them are very smooth, all have really good bearings. I don't know what kind of bearings are stocked with this, but they are very smooth. You know those moments where the yo-yo starts making noise after a while playing it? These haven't been doing it over a year, so I am very impressed with the quality control on these, so very well done on Damian for that one. In summation of the physical attributes, I would say this is a very well made yo-yo. Honestly, not that much I could say negatively about this yo-yo. Besides the fact that I'm not really that big of a fan on inner rim bimetals, but besides that, very well made. Now with all that out of the way, let's move on to playability. First off, we have rejections. Now, rejections, aside from technique, rejections are heavily influenced by the yo-yo's shape and angle. So if you have a yo-yo head that has a steeper build, and the walls are set to a higher degree, or if the yo-yo has more contact with the string, rejections are usually much easier to execute. In contrast to horizontal, where you would want a broader yo-yo so it doesn't make as much contact to the sides. As for this yo-yo, the angle is quite steep, but I was surprised that it didn't accidentally reject on some of my technical tricks. Despite how steep it is, or despite the angle of the steepness, rejections are very well done. In terms of power, this is where it slightly dips. So the thing is, it is very light, and so at first, if you try to push it really fast, it can die fairly quickly. Now that might seem bad at first, but if you control the yo-yo very well, if you know how to push it and how to stop very well, this can last a very long time. So it's actually it's quite a roller coaster of events. So that's all I can say for the power on this one. Maybe a 2 out of 5 or a 3 out of 5, but more or less it's a bit lesser than what I would want. But at the same time, given how light this is, I wouldn't expect to absolutely push this yo-yo to its limits. This is the kind of yo-yo that I would play around every now and then because of how light it is and how comfortable it is in terms of how you play with it. As for the minimum sleep threshold of simply dropping the yo-yo and letting it spin, we got an average of 2 minutes and 10 seconds. So I'd say that's actually really good despite how light it is. So in terms of its acceleration, it goes very fast. It is very light, and despite how non-aerodynamic the shape is, it is actually very good in terms of how fast it can move at a standing point position. So let me just explain how acceleration works. So essentially, acceleration is how fast the yo-yo can move on a standing point position. So from 0 to 60 in that sense. But agility, this was formerly momentum. Agility is how fast it can change its direction. And so the thing that sucks about this yo-yo isn't its acceleration, but its agility. The reason why I can say that is when you change directions in quick maneuvers, it can lose a lot of its power because you're hitting the yo-yo in areas that it's not exactly supposed to be very often. So when you hit this yo-yo in, let's say, different angles, it might lose a bit more of its spin or a bit of its momentum. And so that's why I can say that the agility part isn't that very well done, I'd say. But, you know, that's pretty fine. That's really depending on your playstyle. Going into catchability, the yo-yo is quite narrow. Well, it's not narrow at all, actually. It is a decent width for most technical players, and actually shorter string players can appreciate this kind of gap much more. And so as for catchability, I'd say I'd give it a 3. As for stability and horizontal, it's not that great, with the yo-yo not being as aerodynamic as much and with it having a steeper build than some. I'd rate this as a 2 out of 5. But for now, let's move on to size comparisons. First off, here are these specs. Moving on to size comparisons, here is the Fusion next to the Offset Yoyo's Deviant, the Yo-Yo Factory Shutter Wide Angle, the Magic Yo-Yo Node, the Yo-Yo Factory Edge 2022, and as for the most similar looking yo-yo, we're going to be comparing this yo-yo to the Magic Yo-Yo Skyva. Now this yo-yo has been a long time runner. Looking at the two yo-yos, you can see that they honestly have the same shape, except for the fact that the Fusion has a bit more cuts, and the Skyva is just slightly, it's slightly rounder. And as for the cups, they're nothing alike. The Skyva has a finger spin cup, while the Fusion has a very sharp spike. Keep note of the very sharp in the spike area. Moving on to the conclusions. While you might expect the yo-yo to be a fairly simple, very comforting yo-yo, very light, you're absolutely right. Honestly, everything I expected on this yo-yo was pretty much dead on, except for the fact that the lightness didn't really bother the power as much. I was expecting it to die much more frequently, but it actually survived a lot of my tricks very well. And for the players, I would recommend this to the casual player. I wouldn't really recommend this to the competitor, or maybe the collectors maybe, but honestly, if you're just in the yo-yoing scene to enjoy the experience, I'd honestly go for this. This is actually a very fun yo-yo, and I would actually keep playing with this outside of reviewing. So honestly, it's a pretty good buy. Moving on to the tier list, I'd put this yo-yo in B tier. For the price you get with this yo-yo, I would absolutely recommend it, but it doesn't really outshine my fancy spots like the other yo-yos that I have, so I keep this at B tier. In conclusion, I'd say this yo-yo is great. If you want to buy it, the links are down in the description. And so with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you guys did, be sure to hit that like button and comment down any ideas you might have, and I'll check them out. If you want to keep seeing more videos like this, remember to hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell to be reminded whenever I upload a new video. And with that out of the way, thank you guys for watching and see you on the next one.